Hi everyone, it's Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be doing some art journaling, using some rules in your art journal basically. And this came about was I was in a bit of a funk and just wanted to go back to creating something without thinking, and I realised that I've been teaching an art journaling class for the last few months, and I've come up with sort of my go-to list of rules that I use when I'm creating an art journal page. So I thought, well, why not take your own medicine and actually do that? So it's about a list of 10 rules, and of course you can skip them, you can put them in different orders, but they're the things that I tend to do on all my art pages. So the first one that I'm doing here is just to build a background, and to do that I'm just using some acrylic paint. You can see it's put on, really messily, things are overlapped, colours are mixed that aren't particularly brilliant. You can see brush strokes in it, but it's okay because I know I'm going to add some stuff over it. So one of the things that I do when I'm doing this, obviously though, is to dry off in between my layers. The second part that I'm adding to this, or the second step I suppose, is adding collage. So this is what this step is. And to this particular page I'm using a mixture of ephemera pieces. So there's some music, there are some tissue papers, there's some painted tissue papers that I've created that I'm going to add in. You can see that my brush that I'm painting this down with isn't particularly clean, that the paint in the background isn't altogether dry, so some of that paint is transferring onto my collage pieces, and that's all helping blend it into the background. I'm not panicking that it's not all clean colours, because it's just helping it blend in together. There's no rhyme or reason to where I'm putting collage, apart from the fact I'm sort of just looking at things and thinking, oh, that'll go there, or I need a bit more colour down there. It's just not really thinking about it. If it sits in the edge, it sits on the edge. If I need to sort of join two pieces together, that's what I'm going to do. So again, a lot of this stuff there's not really much thinking to, because it's just part of the background. You're not getting to the focal point at this stage. So this is why I really love this process, because you don't have to think, you just do. And the best thing to do is just go to your collage bin or your paints and just set out a few paint colours, a handful of collage bits and pieces, and just glue it all down or paint it all down. When I was doing this, I suddenly realised that while I've got this down in my little book that I hand out when I'm teaching the class, I've probably actually put it down in the wrong order, because usually I start with collage first and then add some paint. But as you can see, it works in any way. The next step, so step 3, is to add stencils or stamps to the background to add a little bit of interest. So I'm going through my rather large range of stencils here. I was trying to find some bigger, chunkier stencils for this. Most of the stencils I'm using, I think, are from Dina Wakley. The reason for that is they're a nice little size, and they actually sit in a little set of drawers off to the side, so they're very handy just to grab out as I go, plus some of my favourites. So I'm just going in and just adding some pattern over here. You can see I'm using a sponge. It's quite light over here, but it's just adding some colour, and I'm adding it over the painted background. I'm adding it over the collage. I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing. I'm just putting some different colours down in different areas. This piece I'm actually going to put across the middle of the page, so that sort of ties the two pages together. And it's using one of my favourite colours, is the fuchsia from the Dina Wakley range. And in a lot of cases, I just keep stenciling until I use up all the paint, and then I change over and use something else. So again, there's really no rhyme or reason to how I do it. It's just go until you're happy. So you may have noticed there I cut off the top of my sponge. I just tend to cut off where the paint's been and then keep reusing the sponge over and over. If it's a light colour going into a dark colour, like beginning with the lime going into the fuchsia, I didn't actually cut the sponge off. I just put the fuchsia over the top because it's so dark it blots out the original colour. But changing to that blue colour, I would have ended up with a purple otherwise, so I had to cut it off to start off a new one. So this time I'm putting over the flowers, and this is now starting to come together and tying together more as a focus area, and by putting the big flowers over the top, because they're starting to draw the eye to where I want it to go. Next thing I'm going to do is adding in some deliberate colour. So usually when I'm doing this in my collage, if you follow my channel for a while, it's usually when I break out my watercolors and add some watercolor over the top of my collage bits and pieces. In this case though, I'm actually deliberately going back and adding some white. So I'm adding some restful places for my eye to sit on this piece. So I'm actually thinking about where I'm putting this on this page at this stage. And you can see I'm not filling up the whole stencil, I'm just choosing little parts of it and thinking about where I'm putting it. Kind of in a sort of random pattern across the page, but you know, not necessarily all in one place. So that's sort of deliberately thinking about where I'm putting colour on my page. So at this stage I've got a very busy background and I've done 4 things. So I've put my background colour down, I've done some collage, I've added some stencils over the back, and now I've added some deliberate colour. Next thing I'm going to do is add some stamping over the top. So a lot of the stamps that I use these days tend to be mark making stamps, so something to just add some interest in the background. I'm also using the archival inks, which are a permanent ink. They're also an oil-based ink, which does something really interesting when you put paint over the top of them. It actually raises the colour through the top, so you can get some really cool effects with that. I'm not doing too much stamping on this page, but just a little bit on it. And now I'm going in with one of my favourite stamps, which is adding some text onto the page. Now you could do this either with a stamp or just writing over your page, but it just adds something different to it. So you get sort of this really, I suppose, like graffiti style effect in the background. So once I've finished, again I'm drying off, and I always dry off between my layers as I go. Even with my stamping ink, even though it's permanent, I want to make sure it's actually completely cured before I go on to my next step. Now I've gone back a step because I'm going back and I'm again adding in some deliberate colour. I wanted to put some darkness back on the page again, which seems a bit silly while I've put the white on, but you can see it sort of just adds something extra in, and it knocks out some of the background. While I love having busy backgrounds, it is good to sort of give your eye something to focus on. And you hear people talk a lot about white space, but in this page, that dark Payne's grey colour, it's kind of acting as a white space as well, because it's giving my eye something to rest on. It's giving me a line across the middle of my page that my eye can sort of rest on and not be overwhelmed by what's happening in the background. Now I'm going in, so with step 6 is doing my mark making. So I'm using some of these chunky woody Stabilo pencils. They're kind of like the Stabilo oil pencil I use a lot, but much thicker. They are water activated. They're actually designed for kids, but they're amazing to use, and they're just perfect, just a different size, and they write on everything. They write over the top of plastic. They can actually write on windows as well, so they've been great fun to use in my artwork. I'm also going in with my Posca paint pens to add some mark making, and just as simple as putting some little dots of colour across the page. And you can see while in the background, in my first few layers, I was very random with what I did. Now I'm starting to think about sort of some patterns or some lines to lead my eye across the page. So just using those white dots across the page, it helps my eye focus and go through the page of where I want to sort of lead it. Excuse me. So again, I'm drying it off before I go, because you can see that in the middle I kind of smudged it. Particularly when you're sort of doing dots with the paint pen, sometimes you can get a lot more paint out than you actually expected. So I'm just using my roller of my paper towel to roll that off. So this is me using a focal image on my page now. And this is one of the new Dina Wakley collage tissues. It's quite a large one. And the reason I chose it is, one, because it's got text in the background, which I love, but also because it has that beautiful image of the woman, but it's a lot of positive space, I think, so you can actually see the background through it. So the beautiful thing about collage tissues is when you actually glue them down, you get you can see through the background. You've got this text on there and you've got the image on there, but you can actually still see through to the background. So it's a really great way of adding something to your page without taking away from what you've done in the background. I know a lot of people's complaints about people art journaling is they spend so much time doing these beautiful backgrounds and then they stick something over the top. And I can understand where that comes from. For me personally, doing the background in itself is the joy of doing it, and I don't mind sticking something over the top because I've done what I've done in the background and I've enjoyed doing that, and now I'm adding something over the top. But when you can add something like this that you can see through, it is a real bonus. I'm just going in with a large stencil from Donna Downey now on the other page, which is Live Your Art. And I chose to use the Payne's Grey one because it was sitting there. I still have quite a lot out on my page, or on my glass mat, sorry. But I didn't like how dark it was, so I wanted to do something to make it really bright. So you can see I've put my stencil back down again and I've offset it somewhat, and I'm actually using a gold texture paste or modelling paste, and using a silicone spatula to spread that through so it's nice and even over my page. And that will now give me a shadow, a drop shadow on my Live Your Art, and you can see how that stands out on my page. I'm just going in with a craft knife to scrape off any excess that sort of slipped through my stencil while I was doing it, so just to neaten it up a little bit. And the good thing about this texture paste is it dries really, really quickly. So you do need to dry it. You do need to make sure as you are drying it that it's not just the top layer that's dry, it does need to dry the whole way through. So you can dry the top layer so you can do what I've just done and sort of flip the page to clean the stencil off, but that's not 100% dry yet. And you'll notice when I do some mark making over the top of it, it's still quite malleable. So you do need to leave your page open for it to dry off completely. Now I'm just going in with my Stabilo Oil pencil to draw over that image again, and just to pop it out from the background somewhat. It was a little bit, it had lost its shape a little bit, so I just wanted to make sure those black lines came out. And I do love doing that because it helps my hand draw over those beautiful shapes. I'm not great at figure drawing, but if I can practice over things like that, it helps my hand get used to how it moves. So you can see here I'm just using my paint pen to put some dots over it, and when I was dotting on it, it didn't harm my paint pen in any way because the texture paste had formed a skin over the top. But it did dab into it, so I got a little bit of extra texture on it. So just be aware that you do need to make sure that everything's nice and dry when you're finished. So finally I had this quote that I'd found and I printed it out onto some collage background, and I decided to glue that in. So inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. And I was just kind of trying to work out how I wanted to put that on the page, whether I wanted it to go whole way across or split it up. And in the end I decided to sort of split it up into the two parts, which I quite like how it sort of works. So you've got the quote and you've got the Live Your Art and the picture in the background with the busy background. Once I'd finished that, I was just sort of looking at it going, is it finished? Have I done everything I want to do? And I decided, as I do in a lot of my figures, that I wanted to put some height washi on it, just to sort of make it look a little bit interesting. The final thing I did was to add in some of this other washi tape, which is some of my favourite, and it's I Make My Voice Strong and something else. I can't remember what the quote is. I'll make my voice strong, my spirit alive. So that's a Dina Wakley one. And that's part of step 8, which is the finishing off. So this is the end process. It's a fun process to do, and just having those rules means that you can stop thinking and just create, which is great when you're sort of stuck in a rut. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye for now.